We need the console wars back now more than ever. I'm tired of hearing people say that, oh, the console war mentality, that's old dinosaur stuff. Things are way better now. Games are on all platforms. It's actually Nintendo, they're the greedy ones. They have their games locked on the Nintendo platforms and they're not on PC. Like they're the bad guys keeping it exclusive. The old man mentality and all that. And I just think that's like completely wrong. Now, I'm not saying we need console wars back of like people just being like nimrods and being like, oh, Xbox is the best, like PlayStation sucks, Nintendo sucks, blah blah blah. We already have that today, with content creators that are like, that do this for a job. YouTube's not my job, but the people who are like, niche down and like only making Xbox content or PlayStation or Nintendo content, like they have financially like benefit for them to champion their console and knock down other people's console, and then their audience, they're the people who are fanboying and champion behind that. Okay, like we already have, even though the console wars are pretty much over, we still have that going on. And so I don't think that's going to end. No, we need the companies to be at war. We need them to be competing and trying to, instead of milking the customers they already have, to try to pull customers from each other and grow that way, and not just grow only by milking their current customers. And I think back, and the best times, the best games, the best experiences, the best gaming culture were times during console wars. And as soon as the console wars end, now we have all the problems with modern gaming, and modern gaming is terrible. And I think it's directly related to the end of the console wars. And so if you're with me right now, please do consider hitting like and subscribe. But let me take you back real quick to the Super Nintendo versus Sega Genesis. In my opinion, I wasn't there during this time. This was before my time, but when I look back at it, I feel like this is like the first true console where, Sega does what Nintendo don't. Now, the people that lived during this time, the Sega Genesis fans, the people who are fans of Sega Genesis have been lifelong Sega fans. And like, even though like after the Genesis, I mean, in my opinion, Sega didn't really do anything that crazy. Like the Saturn, in my opinion, again, super forgettable. Game Gear, super forgettable. People love the Dreamcast though. The Dreamcast is actually kind of legendary. Except that ended up failing. But point is, starting with the Genesis, it was so powerful that people today want Sega to come back and release a new console. Now, I don't think that would ever work. I think the only way that could even possibly work is if they stop, pull all their exclusives off of all the other consoles, and because exclusives sell consoles, right? If they're not selling exclusives, then it's just basically an Xbox, and Xbox is failing, right? It's an Xbox with a different logo, and you have to start a new digital library. Like, I don't know. Hey, if they want to do that, that'd be cool, because like I like Sega games, so like I would buy a console to still continue to play Sega games if they did it. I just don't think they would do it. And I don't think that's really what people like truly want when they say they want a new Sega. They just want something that's that feels cool, right? And yeah, I mean, Super Nintendo, legendary games also. But this all spawned from a console war, right? PlayStation versus N64, they were going to be partners, PlayStation and Nintendo. Nintendo parted ways. PlayStation was pretty much like, this is war, and we got the PlayStation. Nintendo wanted to use cartridges. Sony wanted to use CDs. CDs were like way cheaper and easier to use. And so PlayStation has thousands of games where N64 only has like 300 games. So that war, we got plenty of PlayStation. If you're a PlayStation, if you grew up on that, you had so many games. You were eating good. If you grew up with an N64 like me, not as many games. We had some of the best games of all time, And N64 had that weird controller, but they introduced the analog stick. Sony, they're at war. Here comes the DualShock. They're like, we're going to copy your homework. We're going to steal that control stick. Like, we've already released our console, but whatever. We're going at it. And you know what? We're going to do one better. 2 sticks. Bam, bam. Yeah, Like, they're fighting. They released the DualShock. And that brings us into the next generation. GameCube, PS2, Xbox, Dreamcast. I mean, this was peak, in my opinion. This was in my gaming prime back in the day. This was the best, console, generation, in my opinion. Full out war. Sega gets destroyed with the Dreamcast. They're out. Like, Xbox comes in, curb stomps them. Sega, they die a quick and early death. But we got Xbox, and the Xbox and the Xbox 360 were legendary consoles. Incredible games like Halo and Gears of War. Enter the Xbox. That's awesome. At that time, PS2 was the most underpowered console of them all, but it still won out. It had incredible games. I grew up with the N64 and a Game Boy. That's just like what my parents got me. Same thing with GameCube. Parents just got me that. They upgraded it. They needed something to put me in front of the TV, right, to keep me occupied. But the PlayStation 2, that was the first console I wanted. Why did I want that? Because Dragon Ball Z Budokai was coming out on the PlayStation 2. Yeah, now looking back at it, it's on both consoles. But if you weren't there, it came out years before the GameCube version. Maybe it was just 1 year. Who knows? Back then, time felt longer, right? And I wanted to play Dragon Ball Z Budokai. I wanted to play a Dragon Ball Z video game. I love Dragon Ball Z. I still do. What sold me on the PS2? Exclusives. That was an exclusive game at the time for the PS2. That sold me on the PS2. I wanted the PS2. In this generation, they're fighting all three of these now. Sega's knocked out GameCube. They couldn't really keep up. We still got cool exclusives though, right? We got Resident Evil 4 only on GameCube, one of the best GameCube games out there. But they're fighting, and still, GameCube's losing it. PlayStation 2 is just controlling the market. Xbox is taking a really good chunk, being the new cool thing. GameCube can't keep up with these graphic wars. So far, up until now, all the way in the Super Nintendo and Genesis days, up until this GameCube, PS2, Xbox, there's been one lane they're competing for. Once you got those 4 consoles in, there wasn't enough room for 4 in this lane. Sega dropped out. Now, in my opinion, in the next generation, Xbox 360, PS3, and then the Wii, Nintendo proved that there was another lane that could exist. And I feel like that's the seed that kind of started the end of the console wars. So Nintendo, they swerved off. Genius move, no doubt. Carved out their own lane. A lot of casuals, grandparents, and all that. Everybody had a Wii, right? But, if you were like me and you were a gamer back then, I appreciate the Wii a lot more today. But, at the time, I don't know, the Wii was probably one of the reasons why, I had undiagnosed depression, for a long time, right? When it was announced as the Nintendo Revolution, it was the coolest thing ever. And then it's the Wii, and then the motion controls, and then, everything's a 2D game. It's all super casual. And what happened? Was I just fanboying Nintendo and sticking with it? No, these consoles are at war. I switched over to Xbox 360. I had a Wii. It was my secondary console, but that generation was all Xbox 360 for me. And, all my friends had Xbox 360 and all that. And yeah, some people had PS3. And I looked over there. I wanted to play Resistance. I wanted to play Metal Gear Solid 4, Ratchet and Clank. There was all these cool PlayStation 3 games out there that were being made. But I didn't have a PlayStation 3. And I wasn't able to play those. Was I complaining about it, saying it wasn't fair? No, it just is what it was. I was playing Xbox. And, Xbox just completely destroyed PlayStation at the beginning. And then later on in the generation, Xbox is trying to grow farther. And how are they doing it? They say that Nintendo has this lane over here, this separate lane. And they're like, we're going to try to consume customers from that lane. They introduced the Kinect and avatars and all that. And saying what you want about it, I think the Kinect and the avatars are terrible. Was not executed great at all. Xbox should have stayed in their lane. But you know what? They tried. They tried grabbing customers from the other lane. It backfired. It didn't work. PlayStation, they're sneaking out in the background, right? They finally figured out the cost problem with the PS3. Towards the end of it, I eventually bought a PS3. I've always wanted a PS3. It was eventually got down to $200. That third revision that George Foreman one, I picked that up for $200 at the end of the generation. I have a whole bunch of 3-packs. I want to show that off in a video someday of my PS3 games. I haven't played yet because it was at the end of the generation. The Xbox One came out. But yeah, they were fighting the whole time, and they were ready for the PS4. Xbox, they got comfortable. They tried introducing DRM and a mandatory Kinect. They raised the price to $500 because they thought they owned the lane. They thought there was no competition. PlayStation comes in, they release their console for $400. Why? Because they're at war. They're fighting for the people, for the customers, for the gamers. No DRM. That video where they showed of them handing the game and how to share your games with other people, that was it. That was the end of the console war, in my opinion. Xbox, they got knocked out of that lane into their own third lane. Without that moment, there would be no Game Pass. Xbox, they tried to recover with a service strategy, a software and service strategy. They got Game Pass. That was made. It worked for a while because they pretty much gave it away for free, right? It worked for a while. Then they're like, we need more games to fuel this beast. They make these big purchases of like Activision, Blizzard, ZeniMax, and then big boy Microsoft, Big Daddy. They're like, I want to return my investment, and they're like, but Daddy, it's gonna take time. They're like, I want my money back now. And so what are they doing? Instead of like slowly growing the Xbox, now that they're releasing the Xbox games everywhere because they need to find 10 million customers somewhere to sell their games to, and they're not all on Xbox, so they have to start selling them on Nintendo and PlayStation. And now look where we're at now. Xbox is in their own lane, PlayStation's in their own lane, and Nintendo's in their own lane. There's these three lanes not competing for each other, yet they're all able to survive in harmony. And some people are like, oh yeah, this is great. You know, you can play your games anywhere you want. Like, doesn't matter what console you're on. There's cross-platform play now, but it's like all these companies, they're all unchecked. But all these companies, they're still trying to grow, right? We live in a world of infinite growth. And if they're on their own separate lanes and they're not trying to grow by getting more customers and players from these other lanes, their only option is to milk their own lane that they're in. Hardware prices go up, software prices go up, subscription services get introduced, and then those prices go up. And it's like, if there's no competition between these companies, if there's no console wars going on, then they're just totally content with, like, we have a good player base right here. Our only focus is to get Switch 1 users to transition and upgrade to the Switch 2. We want PlayStation 4 users to upgrade to PS5. We want to sell that hardware and then, you know, sell more games. And we're going to raise the prices on those games and the subscription services because, you know, people already have their digital libraries. This is what they're telling themselves. They already have their digital libraries. So if a gamer's on Nintendo Switch, they're not going to buy the PS5, right? So we'll just release Lego Horizons on Nintendo Switch and try to get some money from those customers. And Xbox, they're like, we'll just put our games everywhere because no one's on Xbox. We'll put them everywhere else and, you know, we'll charge whatever. And I don't know how we recover from this. Again, when these companies get comfortable, we get less games. Like PlayStation, they're very comfortable in their lane. They spent this entire generation pursuing this mythical live service like cash cow to make the next Fortnite. So many projects, so much wasted time and money into these Concord games. And yeah, like what are we doing? They're not trying to compete against the other customers. They're just sitting there digging and trying to look for a gold, and they're not finding it. And I don't know how we recover from this, right? Like all the consoles now are becoming a lot of the same. There's no big difference between them, but something needs to change, right? And I don't know if we're no longer in a hardware war. I guess the only way to go is a software war, and that's really what gamers want, right? Or just games. And you know, we're approaching $80 games, and they keep saying they can't make a game cheaper than $80, but like, I don't buy it at all. They're saying the game budgets are going up, and that's the reasoning for it. I don't buy it at all. Look at Spider-Man. I'm going to use that as an example. I love the Spider-Man games, but $300 million, right? It's $300 million to produce that game, and let's say they need to sell 10 million copies, right? And so, because they couldn't sell enough copies on the PlayStation 5, they're selling it on PC. They ported it over there. They did this with many of their PlayStation games. And who knows, maybe it is going to come out on Xbox so they can sell more copies. Because if they're looking for 10 million sales and they're not making them on PlayStation 5, where else are they going to go? But in my opinion, I feel like that these companies should more or less, instead of $300 million on a single game, make 3 games for $100 million each. And instead of selling it for $70 or $80, let's use $80 for an example, sell it for $50. So $100 million budget, $50 game. Now, instead of needing to find 10 million individual people to buy that game, if you get one individual to buy 2 of those games, you make $20 extra off of these 2 $50 games than you do with the one single $80 game. And imagine if that customer bought all 3 of the games, right? Then you make an extra $70 than if it was just a one $80 game. And I think that's the way to go. I don't know if these companies get out of having this like 80-hour long single open world game. Like, how much money are they? And you know, there's no. I get it when there's microtransactions because the longer they play, the odds that they're gonna like spend more money on it, and then you know they make more money off of that single purchase after it's already been made. Like, I get it on paper. I don't get it for the single player games. Like, do they want people to be living in them for so long so they can stream them and post photos online with the photo mode, and eventually that's like free advertisement, and then maybe someone else is gonna want the game, and then slowly they'll hit that 10 million sales over time. I don't know, but like, I've been having so much fun playing like 12-hour long games lately, and it's like, I would love if like, you know, Sony released like a Jack and Daxter game, a Sly Cooper game, an Ape Escape game, all these for like $50. I'd probably buy all of them versus just like one like $80 Ghost of Tsushima 3 or last, you know, something big, God of War 3 that's going to take like 80 hours. When I see that's going to be 80 hours long, it's like, I mean, I don't know if I have time for that. Like Fable on Xbox, I think that game actually looks pretty cool. I'm not going to play that right away because whenever that comes out, if it's fall 2026, like there's so many other games competing for it. That game looks like it's a 100-hour plus long game. Like I ain't trying to do that right now. Uh, but if it was like a 12-hour long game, I could probably knock that out in a couple weeks, and I'd be all for it. Um, and gamers want to buy games, right? So I feel like some of the best games over time, like everyone's champion, like play indie, play double A, and like yeah, they're good games. Like I like Hollow Knight and all that, but I feel like the price point's the biggest part of it. A $20 game, a 30, 40, $50 game. Once you get up to 70 and 80, it's like, I don't know, these companies think we want to charge 80. We need to make sure it's worth $80. But it's like, come on, just make the $50 game. And then if you have three games for $300 million instead of one game, again, you don't need to find 10 million individuals. Yeah, you could find if you can find a third of that, you can find 3.33 million people who can buy all three of the games. There's gonna be some people that buy all three, some people that buy two, and many other casuals that buy one. But maybe there's a game out there that interests somebody, and they buy that one game, and they're like, "Oh, I like this game. Maybe I like that game. I'll try that out." I think Astrobot. Love Astrobot. And it obviously feels like a Nintendo game. It's like, oh, here's a Nintendo game on PlayStation. Astrobot would probably make sense like on Nintendo. And there's probably a lot of people who have a Switch that want to play Astrobot. It's a fantastic game. In some aspects, it's almost like they did like something that Nintendo would have done but better. Like honestly, it's a great game. But is that one game enough for a Nintendo fan to buy a PlayStation? I mean, the best thing you do is have both a PlayStation and a Nintendo Switch. You can play all of it. But if we're going to start trying to pull customers from the other lanes, it's like Astrobot's a very good advertisement. But if someone hops from Nintendo and bought a PlayStation for Astrobot, what else is there? They have the IP like Ape Escape and like, I don't know, Parappa the Rapper and like, I don't know, Jack and Daxter, Ratchet and Clank. The Ratchet and Clank game is really good, but they only have one on PS5, Sly Cooper. They have these mascot IP. They're just not doing anything with it. I feel like Nintendo's a lot better at this, at catering to their niche audiences. Like for a while in the Switch One's life, they pretty much been releasing one brand new game every month. I mean, they have that Emio Smiling Man, this Endless Ocean, like these games that might not even break 100 or a million copies, but they still make them, they still produce them. And I feel like they have their big bangers like 3D Mario, 3D Zelda, but they have these like tiny little games. And so maybe you like a niche game like Endless Ocean or something, and that can get you in the door. And then they have all these other games that eventually you might get. And like, yeah, Switch 2, like, I mean, I don't know if they're kind of doing with the Switch 2 editions and the DLCs. It's kind of thinned out. I think maybe they're buying their time for later on in the generation. But no, what other company is releasing one game a month? And it doesn't even have to be PlayStation or Xbox. It could be like Capcom or Sega or something. If no one else is competing against that cadence, Nintendo can just drop one game a month and never put it on sale. They're in no rush to like put a game on sale. Back in the day, in the GameCube, PS2, Xbox, these companies are at war. They'd sell the console for a loss. They'd make up the rest of the money in software sales. And you'd see things like Player's Choice and Greatest Hits and Platinum Hits. They're selling the games for $20 because they need to sell more and more software to make up for the loss of the hardware. But now, I also think we're in a culture right now that, let's pretend for a moment, if they wanted to, they don't want to, but let's say Sony, let's say they sold the PlayStation 5 on a Black Friday for $200. You'd think like, wow, they're gonna like, the customer base is gonna grow. They're gonna sell so many PlayStations. Now, obviously, they're gonna sell it at a loss, right? And hope to make it up in software sales. But if that went on sale for $200, the only people it's gonna get sold to are scalpers with bots. Like that's what's gonna be, bots online with scalpers, or if it's in person, it's gonna just be scalpers buying them up. And then they're gonna sell these consoles for a loss, and then they're just gonna sit in someone's basement until and just rot until they can sell it for basically the old MSRP or a little under. And then PlayStation's not making the software sales for it, making up for that loss. So it's like, even if they wanted to sell it cheap, it's just like not even going to happen, right? Like I don't see it being like a smart move, right? Because it's just because a scalper culture. And so I think we're just at a point where I like, as much as I want a console war to happen, and that'd be great, I feel like maybe consoles have just become too much of the same, but exclusive sell consoles, so pretty much you probably have a PlayStation 5 or a Nintendo Switch because of the exclusive games, and then third party games are pretty good, like on each. I mean, yeah, like I do most of my third party on PS5 because it's stronger than Nintendo Switch. But this Nintendo Switch 2 is definitely going to be serviceable for a lot of people who can only choose one. And if you lean more towards the Nintendo exclusives, you're not going to be left in the dust on third party all that much anymore. And the next generation, like as the consoles like they're eventually going to even out, right? 4K 60 is like as good as we're going to get, right? And then it's just exclusives. And then, if the IP itself can't sell itself, then I think whichever company changes their model and starts targeting that cheaper price point, they're the ones that's going to win out. And that's what the war is about, is trying to get the gamers from the other lane to play on their console. Again, exclusives sell consoles. So if all the exclusives I want to play are on PS5, like that's why I don't buy games on Xbox. I have the Xbox Series X and the PS5. Xbox Series X hasn't had any exclusives. So I play my exclusives on PS5. A third party game comes out that I would play on Xbox or PS5. I'm going to buy on PS5 because I'm already on PS5 playing the exclusives. And then Nintendo Switch, I'm basically playing pretty much just exclusives on the Nintendo. When it comes to third party, I might snag not graphically intense game that's on a really cheap sale, whether it's in physical, in person, or like on the eShop. But people can tell what games like don't need to be like on the PS5, like on the 4K TV, right? Like those 3D pixel, 2D HD remaster, whatever. It's pretty obvious. And so yeah, it's going to end up being a software and services war, absolutely. But yeah, again, I think a big thing with like just play indie, just play AA games. I think it's the price point, and whichever company decides to shy away from the $80 games and target more a $50 package more frequently, let gamers play games, then they're going to win the third party sales. And again, if all these games, 3D Mario, 3D Zelda, Horizon Forbidden, Horizon Zero Dawn, or Last of Us 3 at $50, any of these games at $50, that's a win for the consumers, right? And who knows, like, I don't know if hardware prices are going down anytime soon. I want to see some console wars or even platform wars. You can get Steam in there. If they can start competing with the price and get it down, and let's say PlayStation can't figure out how to make a better PS5 at $300 and they make it work, then that's going to make Nintendo be like, well, how are we going to outsell the PlayStation? It has better graphics and it's $300. We can't price our thing at $450. Then they go down in price. So I don't know. I'm not sure if I see it with the hardware anymore, especially with the scalper culture the way it is. Unless they can produce it. I don't think they can with the world right now. But software, I mean, there's no excuse that you don't need to be making these hundreds of $1 million budget games. We don't need these games to be 80 hours long. Like, we just want more games. There's like no exclusive games on the PS5. It feels like nothing, but Sony has the IP. They have it. They're just not using it. And it'd be great to see more games. I don't know. What do you guys think in the comments? Like, I think these companies should be at war and not just left like unchallenged in their own lanes and just milking us dry. Let me know in the comments what you think. Like the video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you really enjoyed it. And I'll see you in the next video. Later.